Ancient China. Chinese geography is dominated by two rivers. The Huanghe, also called the Yellow River, is 2,900 miles long and flows from Mongolia to the Pacific Ocean. The second river, the Changjiang, is also called the Yangtze River. It cuts across central China for 3,400 miles and ends in the Yellow Sea. This is a map of present-day China showing the two major rivers. Only about 10% of China's land is actually usable for farming. Much of the rest of China is taken up by deserts and mountains. These natural barriers have kept China isolated for much of its history. The Xia Dynasty was the first dynasty in China. It started sometime around 2000 BC, but very little is known about it. It only occupied the area on this map, shown in red. The Xia Dynasty was followed by the Qin Dynasty, which lasted from 1750 BC to 1122 BC. During the Qin Dynasty, China was ruled by an aristocracy, an upper class whose wealth is based on land and whose power is passed on from one generation to the next. The territory controlled by the Qin Dynasty was considerably larger than that of the Xia, though still small compared to modern-day China. The capital of China under the Qin Dynasty was Anyang. Each territory of the Qin kingdom was ruled by an aristocratic warlord who was chosen by the king. The Qin rulers believed in life after death, much like ancient Egyptians. They practiced the veneration or honoring of ancestors, those who came before. In the Western world, this is often referred to as ancestor worship. The Chinese under the Qin Dynasty were also known for their bronze casting. Qin bronze casting was often elaborate and very ornate, as seen in this example here. The Zhou Dynasty ruled China from 1045 BC until 256 BC, the longest-lasting dynasty in Chinese history. The Zhou Dynasty used political structure as the Qin Dynasty. The Zhou Dynasty, shown here in comparison to Qin-controlled territory, was considerably larger. The Zhou Dynasty ruled with a concept called the Mandate of Heaven, an idea where they claimed that an impersonal law of nature, also known as heaven, kept order in the universe through the Zhou king. The Zhou king had a mandate, a command, to rule the people wisely and virtuously, and could be overthrown if he did not follow the correct Tao, also spelled with a T, a word that means the way or the path. According to the Mandate of Heaven, the Zhou king was the ruler of all humanity and had complete and absolute authority over everyone in the world. However, the people had a right to revolution if the king did not follow the correct Tao. If he did not protect and nurture the people, they could overthrow him and put a new king in his place. This ensured that the king would not simply become a tyrant. One of the things that we recognize in looking at Chinese history is that all Chinese dynasties went through a cycle of rise, decline, and collapse as rulers became more corrupt or less able to rule effectively. This was true in the Zhou Dynasty. Civil war broke out in China in 403 BC, starting something known as the period of warring states. China was eventually conquered and reunified by the ruler of the Qin territory in 221 BC. The period of the warring states saw China divided up into smaller, semi-independent kingdoms that fought one another for control of China. During the Zhou Dynasty, peasants farmed the land for wealthy aristocrats, but also owned small pieces of land themselves. Artisans and merchants lived in walled cities, under the direct control of the local aristocrat. Artisans and merchants had fewer freedoms and rights than the peasant farmers. During the Zhou Dynasty, there was wide use of irrigation by the 600s BC. The Chinese used iron for weapons and tools. And the population of China under the Zhou Dynasty reached a height of 50 million people. During this time, China also traded silk, a rare and valuable fabric, with places as far away as Greece and Rome in Europe. Silk is a cloth made from the cocoon of the silkworm. They are very hard to raise, and the technique of creating and cultivating silk was a closely guarded secret in China for hundreds of years. The extended family, which includes aunts, uncles, grandparents, and cousins in addition to the parents and children, was the basic family unit in ancient China and a symbol of social order. The ancient Chinese practiced a concept known as filial piety, the duty of the family to put the needs of the family and the community ahead of individual personal needs and desires. Many Western societies put the emphasis on the needs and desires of the individual, while cultures like China focus more on the family and the community. Family was important in China for many reasons, especially the need to have as many people as possible farming land. Like many other ancient civilizations, China was mostly patriarchal or dominated by men, though aristocratic women did have some influence on politics and court life. The Chinese writing system developed sometime during the Zhou Dynasty. It used a combination of pictograms and ideograms, or characters representing an idea or concept. Each character then had its own sound. As you can see from this chart, the written Chinese language has evolved and changed considerably over the years, though there are some recognizable elements in the modern characters. Confucius, a man also known as Master Kong, was a Chinese bureaucrat and philosopher who was born in 551 BC. He developed a philosophy that emphasized harmony and stability in society. His philosophy was political and ethical rather than spiritual in nature, and focused on duty and humanity as the most important elements of a society. Confucius, or Master Kong, believed that stability and order were the most valuable things for a society to have. He developed his philosophy during a time of great turmoil in China, when aristocratic fought with each other for control of the country. Duty for Confucius meant following the idea of filial piety and putting the needs of the family or community ahead of one's own needs. This sense of duty was governed by what he called the 5 constant relationships. The 5 constant relationships are between parent and child, husband and wife, older sibling and younger sibling, older friend and younger friend, and ruler and subject. In each relationship, duty flows both ways. The person on the left in each pair has the power. The older sibling, the older friend, the ruler, the parent, the husband. But those individuals with power also have a responsibility to protect and nurture the person on the right. And if the person on the right did something they were not supposed to, the person on the left would get in trouble for it. Confucius also emphasized humanity, or compassion and empathy for others. He believed that others should be tolerated even if you disagreed with them. Confucius's ideas were collected in a book called the Analects, written down by his followers sometime after his death in 479 BC. Confucianism would not become a popular philosophy in China until the Han Dynasty. Another important philosophy developed in ancient China was Taoism, which comes from the word Tao meaning the way. According to legend, it was created by a man named Lao Zhou, which means old master, sometime around 500 BC. Lao Zhou supposedly collected his teachings in a holy book called the Tao Te Ching, the Book of the Way, which is a series of short poems that emphasized harmony and going with the flow of society. Lao Zhou believed that inaction, rather than action, was the way to achieve harmony and balance with the universe. No one is actually sure if Lao Zhou, a name that means old master, even existed. The poems collected in the Tao Te Ching present a philosophy that emphasizes harmony, living in the moment, and going with the flow. Here is an example. If you are depressed, you are living in the past. If you are anxious, you are living in the future. If you are at peace, you are living in the present. A third philosophy developed around the same time as Taoism and Confucianism was legalism. Legalism is a philosophy that human beings were evil by nature and could only be made to follow the correct way, or Tao, through the use of harsh laws and punishments. Legalists believed that harsh punishments were the only way to keep people following the correct path. The Qin Dynasty was a short-lived one, ruling China only from 221 BC until 206 BC. For most of that time, the country was ruled by Qin Shi Huangdi, a name that means first Qin emperor. Qin Shi Huangdi began ruling the province of Qin in 246 BC at the age of about 13, and proceeded to conquer and reunify China in 221 BC. His regime, the government in power, adopted legalism as their official philosophy. Qin Shi Huangdi, or first Qin emperor, was an aristocratic warlord who defeated the aristocrats of the rival provinces and united China under a single rule. He was harsh, short-tempered, and unforgiving, but he managed to create a unified China. The Qin emperor divided the bureaucracy of China into three parts: the civil division, the military division, and the censorate, a section which watched over government officials to make sure that they were doing their jobs correctly. Qin government officials were also chosen based on merit or ability rather than by birth. Qin Shi Huangdi moved the capital city of China to Xianyang and had to contend with a nomadic group in the Gobi Desert known as the Xiongnu. The Xiongnu had mastered fighting on horseback and began raiding Chinese settlements in northern China. To combat this, the emperor expanded and improved a series of walls that today is known as the Great Wall of China. Jennifer! Just want to get this PowerPoint finished. The Great Wall of China, as we know it today, was not actually built during the Qin Dynasty. It was actually completed about 1,500 years later. Instead, following the death of Qin Shi Huangdi in 210 BC, his son became the second Qin emperor. But the son was overthrown in a revolt in 206 BC. His defeat was followed by 4 years of civil war. A peasant by the name of Liu Bang became the first ruler of the Han Dynasty in 202 BC. He reunified China and took the title of Han Gaozhu, a name that means exalted of Han. The Han Dynasty would last for 400 years, from 202 BC until AD 220. Han Gaozhu created many changes, getting rid of legalism and returning China to Confucian principles. He did keep the censorate and the system of local government created by the Qin, and he continued choosing government officials based on merit rather than birth. The Han Dynasty also introduced a civil service exam, a test that had to be taken in order to take a position within the government, and training schools to prepare individuals for government positions. Another important Han emperor was Han Wudi, or the Martial Emperor Han. He added the region south of the Changjiang to the empire and part of modern-day Vietnam. Following his death in 87 BC, experienced almost 150 years of peace. Though the Han Dynasty was a time of prosperity for China as a whole, taxes on free peasants were very high. Many of the free peasants had to sell their land and become tenant farmers, who worked land for a wealthy aristocrat and paid rent to him in crops or cash. The Han managed to develop steel, an alloy of carbon and iron. They also made tremendous advances in textile or cloth manufacturing and developed paper. The Han also made advancements in sailing technology, including the rudder and fore and aft rigging. Fore and aft rigging allowed a ship to sail against the wind by tacking, or sailing at an angle to the wind. Much like the dynasties before it, the Han Dynasty collapsed after a prolonged period of corruption and ineffectual or immoral rulers. Aristocrats took more and more power from the emperors, and by AD 170 the emperor was essentially powerless. A rebellion in AD 190 sacked the capital city of Liueyang, and in AD 220 a civil war tore the country apart. A collection of nearly 10,000 life-size terracotta warriors, representations of Qin Shi Huangdi's army, were created and buried in his tomb near the city of Xi'an. These lifelike statues were recently discovered and have been a major historical find. The terracotta warriors were a massive collection of life-size soldiers, horses, and chariots, all crafted out of hardened clay and armed to the teeth to protect their emperor in the afterlife.